Hi there, Dave with Crandall Office, and which mesh option should you choose on your new Steelcase Karman chair? Let's find out. Okay, so the first thing we want to take a look at is going to be the three different options available. So first we've got the standard Intermix, which is going to be the standard mesh that you see. There's 6 different color options available on the Steelcase website today for that option. Next we have the Intermix Opaque, which is going to be the one that we have here, which is going to be a little bit more fabric-like, and there's 6 options available as well for that on Steelcase's website today. And finally, we're going to have the Intermix Shift fabric, which is going to be this one that you see. As far as build goes, it's going to be almost identical to the standard Intermix style mesh. The only difference is that as we move this chair, and I'm not sure if it's going to pick it up on the camera here or not, you can see it's going to shift colors depending on the light. Which is a really cool feature. It really adds a lot to the aesthetics of the chair, but functionally they're going to be nearly identical, and so we're going to treat them as one for these comparisons. So now let's take a look at the actual construction of these different mesh materials. And we know from Steelcase that the standard Intermix and the Intermix Shift that we have here are going to be constructed identically. The only difference is going to be that color shift that they've got included in this one. So we're going to treat those as one and the same, as we mentioned. And then we have the Intermix Opaque here. And so as we look at close-ups of these different fabrics, you can see the construction is very similar between the two, outside of the additional soft material that we see on the Opaque fabric. So as we're zooming in, you can see how much more of that softness. You can see the different, what I'm calling puff balls, because that's what it looks like when we're actually zoomed in real close on these macro shots. You can see there's a lot more of what I'm calling the puff balls on the Opaque fabric versus on the standard Intermix. So on the Intermix fabric, when you actually touch and feel these, the standard Intermix and the Intermix Shift are going to have a very soft feel, but when you actually touch the Opaque, it's going to kind of step that up a little bit. The actual softness is going to increase. You can just feel more softness across the entire surface. When we actually look at the breathability, those additional, what I'm calling the puff balls, are going to decrease the breathability based on our testing very slightly. It's also going to decrease the amount of how much you can see through that actual fabric. So with these different construction methods, we do have a slightly different feel to each of these fabrics. And so as we actually put our hand on this, I mentioned in the first video, this Intermix Shift fabric has a much softer feel than what we traditionally know and see on most mesh chairs. For example, on the Aeron chair, it's got kind of a plasticky sort of feel. This has a much softer feel to it. It almost has like a microfiber kind of quality to it. It feels nice and soft. But it also has that kind of mesh feel to it. It's kind of a hybrid. It's very interesting. When we look at the actual Opaque, Intermix Opaque right next to it, it has that very similar feel that I just described, kind of microfibery texture, but it's a much more uniform, softer kind of feel to it when you put them side by side. This has kind of a little bit more grooves and ridges. This is going to be a much softer, more uniform. Like I said, it's going to be much more like a traditional fabric than it is this mesh that has that kind of the ridges and the different kind of coming and goings of a mesh material. So this is going to have a much softer, more uniform material. This is going to be much more like a traditional mesh, but just with a softer touch to it. So when we're looking at the actual looks of these fabrics, the first thing you're really going to notice is that the standard Intermix and the Shift are going to be a much more see-through mesh design. So you're really going to be able to see through this mesh both from the front and the back, whereas the Opaque is going to be much more difficult to see through. You can see as I'm spinning this, and we're going to try to capture this the best we can on camera, but it's just much more difficult to see through this mesh. It's still a very thin material. And you can see through it if you're really getting up close and looking through it, but it's not going to be anywhere near as pronounced as the standard Intermix or the Shift that we see here. So beyond the amount of transparency that we see between these two mesh styles, the other major difference in visual you're going to see is that this is going to kind of have a more uniform lines, and as I mentioned, you kind of have that little bit texture here, but you can really see those lines. It's a very uniform look, but you do notice that. Whereas on the Opaque is going to be a much more fabric. It is a two-tone fabric design, but you're going to see much less of these pronounced lines. It's going to be a much more uniform kind of look and feel to it. So next, let's take a look at the breathability. And first, we'll take a look at the standard Intermix or the Shift that we have here, which are going to be extremely breathable meshes. You can see how see-through it is. It's just a lot of airflow is going to be able to go through the construction of that mesh. when we compare that directly with the Opaque, the additional soft material that's woven into this mesh is going to make it a little bit less breathable. That said, both are still very breathable chairs, especially, so we do have a seat pad underneath the mesh on the seats of both of these chairs, which is going to make the seats a little bit less breathable than the backs by default. But as a general rule, both are going to be much more breathable than a standard padded chair. So breathability is still going to be very high, though when we're looking at them side by side, we do see that the standard Intermix or the Shift is going to be a little bit more breathable than the Opaque. So we wanted to kind of go over those differences. So when we are talking about the feel of the actual mesh, I do want to talk about how it sits, which is going to be a little bit different than what we see on a traditional mesh or a traditional fabric style chair. And it feels nice. It's got that softness, it's got that movement that you expect with a mesh, that kind of springy kind of feel to it. But it does, that microfibery kind of feel that I mentioned, does tend to grip clothing a touch. And it's going to be tough for me to capture, but as I'm moving back and forth here, the mesh is kind of grabbing onto my shirt and I'm moving independently of that with inside of my shirt. Whereas a lot of other fabrics that we see are not going to have that kind of grippiness to your clothing. I've been sitting in this chair for, close to a month now straight, and it has not been something that I've noticed or has bothered me at all. But I did want to touch on it because there's a few other people in the office that did notice it, and it does bother them a touch. So worth mentioning on that. I think this has it's a very hybrid type mesh design that kind of integrates that mesh feel that you've got, but it has that fabric feel as well. I think they did a great job with that, but it can be a little bit sticky on your clothing, so we did want to mention that. All right, so I did want to just do a quick test demonstration with this is just a piece of Guilford & Main open house fabric and that we've got just sitting around, and I just want to kind of put this on these different materials so you can see we have the different Intermix fabrics that we're talking about here, as well as an Aeron chair and a Leap chair with our BioKnit fabric on, just so you can kind of get a reference as to how much of a when I'm talking about your clothing sticking to this fabric, you can just see exactly how much we've got here. And so when I take this fabric sample and I put it onto the Intermix, you can see it's going to stick to the mesh here, but it's not going to take much for it to just knock right off, right? And so it doesn't have a ton of sticky here, but you can see it's just going to slide right off with a little bit. So it's just got a little bit of extra friction. Whereas we put it on something like the Aeron, it is sticking here, but in a lot of the tests that we've had with the Aeron mesh, it's just going to fall right off. So you can see there's a little bit of friction here on the Aeron that we see, but not as much as the Intermix. When we look at the actual BioKnit, you can see it's just gonna fall right off. It's not gonna stick at all. And we're gonna see that with most fabrics. It's not gonna have that kind of general stickiness that we're gonna feel on some of these Intermix or mesh style chairs. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about is going to be the price. So the standard Intermix is going to be the cheapest option of these three. There's going to be a small upcharge. We can tell about $40-ish as of today to get into the Intermix Opaque fabric. And then the Shift is going to be a sizable jump up from there. Now, I'm not 100% sure. You are getting a different frame with their Luxe coating on it when you jump into this Shift. So I'm not sure how much of that is accounted for between the mesh and the actual Luxe coating. But I can't tell you a specific number, but you are looking at a pretty good jump into that Intermix Shift. But it does look pretty cool. So as you can see, we've got plenty of different awesome options available on the new Steelcase Karman. So whether you're looking for a more traditional mesh in the Intermix Standard or Shift, or something a little bit softer and more fabric-like in the Intermix Opaque, I really don't think you can go wrong. Both are very good, high quality, very comfortable mesh options. So it's really just going to be a personal preference thing on which you prefer, that more kind of breathability and see-through design, or a more fabric-like look and feel. Again, both are great options. I wanted to just make sure you guys had all of the information in front of you so you can make the right choice for you. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, please click the like and subscribe buttons below. If you've got any questions at all about the Steelcase Karman or any other chair that we cover, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at our website, crandalloffice.com, our Facebook page, or anywhere else you can reach us. We're always here to help. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hi, Dave with Crandall Office, and You screwed me up. Is that enough zipping for you? That, no, because I don't have a close-up of the standard. So beyond what we see in the amount of see-throughness, what's this? The amount of the transparency, okay. The other chairs, so regardless of fabrics, you might have, yeah, it trailed off. So not a significant difference, but when we're looking at it, we should revisit that. I didn't, I messed that up. I said revisit that. How did I end that? Because could I reshoot?
I don't think there was a...
Okay, okay.
Ooh, I like that one.
Ooh, I like that one.